my son told me to sell my truck to pay his wife's credit card debt, I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, then at the woman sitting beside him, and smiled. That truck held more than metal and miles. It held secrets. Secrets that were about to change everything. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're listening from, because what I'm about to tell you, you won't believe until the end. The smell of gasoline and pine always reminded me of better days. Days when my son Evan used to sit beside me in that same truck, his tiny fingers tracing the worn dashboard while we drove through the mountain roads. He used to say, "One day, Dad, this truck's gonna be mine." I'd always laugh. "Only if you learn how to change the oil first." He'd giggle, that carefree little sound that used to make my wife's eyes soften. But the boy who once asked me how engines worked had turned into a man who barely looked at me when he spoke. And now he was asking me to sell the very truck that built our life, the one that pulled lumber for my contracting business, that carried us through every move, every storm, every start over. We were sitting at the kitchen table that night. Evan's wife, Heather, had her manicured nails drumming against her phone screen, as if being in my house was an inconvenience. "Dad," Evan said, not meeting my eyes. "Heather's had some financial issues." I already knew what that meant. Heather sighed dramatically. "They're not issues, Evan. It's called living." She looked at me like she was explaining something to a child. "You wouldn't understand. Things cost more now. Groceries, makeup, life." I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I just let them talk. "So," Evan continued, "we were thinking you could sell the truck. It's just sitting there collecting dust. That could pay off the balance." Heather leaned back in her chair, satisfied, as if she'd just solved world hunger. "You don't even drive it much, right?" I looked out the window at the old blue Chevy parked under the maple tree. Its paint was faded, the tires cracked from years of loyal service. But inside that truck, deep in the glove box, was something neither of them knew about. Something my wife, before she died, had left for me. I cleared my throat. "You want me to sell my truck to pay her credit card bill?" Evan flinched. "Dad, it's not just hers. We're married. It's our debt." Heather smiled, sugar sweet. "And family helps family, right?" Family. The word tasted different coming from her mouth. I could have told them right then what that truck meant to me. I could have told them that inside the glove box sat a sealed envelope, one that could pay not just her debt, but change Evan's life forever. But instead I said, "All right, if that's what you think is best." Heather blinked. "Really? You'll sell it?" I smiled. "Sure, why not?" Evan exhaled in relief. "Thanks, Dad. You don't know how much this means." Oh, I knew exactly how much it meant. And I also knew what was coming. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the envelope in that glove box wasn't just a document. It was my wife's final gift, and it had both of their names written on it. That night I went out to the truck, flashlight in hand. The air smelled like rain and memory. I opened the driver's door and sat in the seat that still held my shape after all these years. I reached into the glove box and touched the envelope. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting Margaret's was still perfect. "For Evan," it said, "when he learns what truly matters." I smiled. "Not yet, Maggie," I whispered. "Not yet." Because my son still had lessons to learn about greed, loyalty, and what real inheritance means. And the next morning, that lesson began. The morning after that conversation, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet broken through the clouds, and the house was wrapped in that quiet gray light that comes before dawn. The kind of light my wife used to love. I brewed a pot of black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just the way Margaret and I used to drink it when we sat on the porch and talked about the future, a future we thought we'd share. But now, it was just me. Me and the ghosts of the life I'd built. I looked out the window at that old Chevy truck. Its frame was tired, but the heart, the engine, still beat like new. I'd rebuilt it twice over the years, every nut and bolt tightened with care. That truck was part of me, and soon, it was going to teach my son what real value looked like. By mid-morning, Evan showed up. He was wearing that polished look of his, clean shirt, shiny shoes, as if he was auditioning for a version of himself he thought people admired. Heather stayed in the car, idling in the driveway, sunglasses on, scrolling her phone. "Got the title?" Evan asked, stepping inside. I nodded, sliding it across the counter. It's all yours to handle. I trust you. His face softened a bit, maybe from guilt. Or maybe he mistook my calm for surrender. Thanks, Dad, really. He reached for the title, and our fingers brushed. I saw it then, the hesitation in his eyes, the conflict he didn't want me to see. That's the thing about sons. No matter how grown they get, a father can still read them like a map. You sure this is what you want to do? I asked. He hesitated for half a second, then forced a smile. Yeah, it's what's best for everyone. Everyone. That word again. It had a way of excluding the person saying it. He signed his name, tucked the papers into a folder, and said, "There's a guy coming to check it out today. I'll take care of everything." I nodded, pretending to be the old fool they thought I was. "Good. I'll leave it all to you." He grinned, the same grin he used to flash when he got away with something as a kid, and for the first time in years, I saw him through a different lens, a boy who'd grown up chasing easy wins, but soon he'd find out the cost of cutting corners. That afternoon, I watched from the porch as a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out, clipboard in hand, one of those we buy used cars types. Evan shook his hand like they were sealing a business deal. Heather didn't even bother to get out of the car this time. The buyer popped the hood, checked the odometer, scribbled something down. I could hear snippets of their conversation. "Runs fine, but she's old," the man said. Evan chuckled. "Old but reliable. That's kind of the point." I smiled quietly. He didn't even realize how true that was. After a few minutes, the man handed Evan an envelope. Cash, as agreed. Evan counted the bills, $10,000, and I could see the calculation flicker in his eyes. He didn't even look at the truck one last time. When the tow truck arrived, I stayed inside. I didn't need to watch it go. But as I heard the chains clank and the old engine rumble for the last time, I whispered, "See you soon, old friend." Because the thing is, the truck wasn't really gone. Not to me. 3 days later, I got a call from a man named Franklin Shaw, a local restorer who'd bought old vehicles for parts. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "that truck you sold? You mind if I ask you about the glove box?" I froze. My heart skipped. "What about it?" He chuckled nervously. "It's strange. The buyer opened it after we unloaded the truck, and there was this envelope inside. Sealed. Old handwriting. It had your son's name on it." My throat tightened. "What did he do with it?" "Far as I know," Franklin said, "he didn't open it." He looked spooked, real spooked. Then he took off without saying a word. I thanked him and hung up, a slow smile spreading across my face. So Evan had found it. Good. The lesson had begun. That evening, Evan called. His voice trembled slightly. The confidence stripped away. "Dad, we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to sound confused. "About what, son?" "About the truck. And that letter." Ah, the letter. Margaret's handwriting. Her voice from beyond the grave. He hesitated. "It's from Mom, isn't it?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It's from your mother. What did it say?" He exhaled shakily.
"I can't tell if it's real or if this is some kind of test."
I said nothing, just waited. "Dad," he whispered, "it says there's money, a lot of money, hidden somewhere. But why would she leave that in the truck?" I let a long silence stretch between us. Then I said, "Because, son, she wanted to see if you'd sell your family before you tried to find its worth." And with that, I hung up. Evan showed up at my doorstep just before sunset. His car barely stopped rolling before he jumped out. His face pale, eyes wild, the way he used to look when he came home after breaking something expensive as a kid. Only this time, he wasn't 12. And what he'd broken was trust. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling, "you need to explain this." He was holding the envelope in both hands, like it was a bomb about to go off. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. The air between us felt heavy, thick with all the words neither of us had said in years. Heather was in the car, engine idling. She didn't look up from her phone. Of course not. Inside, Evan set the envelope on the table and took a deep breath. "It's Mom's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere." I nodded. "It is." He ran a hand through his hair. It says she left something behind, something for me to find, but she also wrote that you'd know when I was ready. He looked up at me, voice cracking. Ready for what, Dad? For a moment I saw him as the boy he used to be, knees scraped, eyes bright, begging for my approval after catching a ball for the first time. And then I saw the man he'd become, someone who'd traded that boy's wonder for entitlement. She wanted you to understand what real worth means, I said quietly. Not the kind you buy on credit. Evan sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. I thought she was talking about forgiveness or something. But then I turned the page. He pulled out a second sheet from the envelope and slid it across the table. It was a note in Margaret's handwriting, clear, graceful, deliberate. To my son, when you find this, you'll have already made a choice, one that tells your father whether you value what's real or what's easy. The truck you sold once carried your father's first business. It built our home, paid for your school, and brought you home from the hospital. Inside the lining of its passenger seat, there's something that belonged to both of us, something we saved for you. But if you're reading this because you sold it, then that choice tells me everything. Some inherit money, others inherit character. Which will you be? The silence after he finished was thick and fragile. Evan swallowed hard. She hid something in the truck? I nodded. Yes. What was it? I took a deep breath. You'll find out soon enough. His eyes flashed with frustration. Dad, this isn't funny. That guy Franklin said there was something under the seat, but I couldn't find it. He said the new buyer already took it to his shop. I folded my hands on the table. Then maybe you should start by talking to him. Evan stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You're not going to help me? I already have, I said calmly. He stared at me for a long moment, jaw tight, then turned and stormed out. Heather looked up as he climbed into the car, gesturing wildly as he talked. They sped away without another word. That night I sat alone at the kitchen table, the faint scent of oil and rain still drifting in from the open window. I poured myself a drink, lifted it toward the empty chair across from me, and whispered, He's finally looking, Maggie, just like you said he would, because this, all of it, was her plan. Margaret had always known Evan's weakness wasn't cruelty, but pride. He didn't want to hurt people. He just wanted to feel above them, and she knew one day he'd need to be brought back down, not to punish him, but to remind him where he came from. That's why she left the money in the truck. That's why she wrote the letter, and that's why she asked me, before she died, to wait. To wait until the day he tried to trade his roots for luxury. To wait until he tried to sell what couldn't be bought. 2 days later, the phone rang again. It was Franklin, the restorer. Mr. Reeves, he said slowly, you better come down here. I could hear the unease in his voice. Why? What happened? He hesitated. We pulled out the passenger seat. There's something inside, and you'll want to see it yourself. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my jacket and drove. When I arrived at his workshop, the old Chevy sat there under bright fluorescent lights, stripped down, dented, scarred. But it still looked proud. Beside it, Franklin held a small tin box, sealed shut with electrical tape and dust from years gone by. Found this inside the seat frame, he said. There's a note with your wife's name on it. My hands shook as I peeled away the tape. Inside was a folded letter, a small velvet pouch, and a single key, old and brass, with a tag that read Maple Savings Bank Deposit Box 417. Franklin whistled softly. Guess she left you a treasure hunt. I smiled faintly. No, she left him one. That night I called Evan. No anger this time. No tension, just a father's voice. Son, I've got something you need to see. He arrived within the hour, looking worn and sleepless. Heather stayed in the car again, watching through the window like a hawk guarding her prey. I handed him the brass key. His fingers trembled as he read the engraving. What is this? Your mother's last message, I said quietly. And maybe her forgiveness. He looked at me, confusion and shame warring behind his eyes. Dad, I don't deserve it. I smiled sadly. That's the first true thing you've said in a long time. He looked down, swallowing hard. What's in the box? You'll see, but I'll warn you, son. What's inside may not be what you're hoping for. The next morning, we drove together to Maple Savings Bank. the same one where Margaret and I had opened an account 40 years earlier. Evan carried the key like it might burn him if he gripped too tight. As we entered the vault area, the clerk led us to box 417. Evan hesitated, looking at me for permission. "Go on," I said softly. He slid the key into the lock and turned it. The box clicked open with a metallic sigh, releasing the faint scent of paper and time. Inside were two things: a thick envelope labeled, "For my son, Evan," and a smaller one labeled, "For my husband, William." Evan opened his first, his breath caught. Inside were stacks of bank bonds, worth nearly $500,000, but on top of them lay another note in Margaret's neat cursive. "If you found this, it means you were willing to sell what mattered to find what didn't. Use this money wisely. But remember, you didn't earn it. You were given it, like love. And love can run out when taken for granted." Evan stood there silently, eyes wet, the paper trembling in his hands. I opened mine. Inside was a single sentence, written in that familiar, elegant script. "Now he knows, Will. You can rest." Evan looked at me, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You start by not trying to buy forgiveness. You earn it, one day at a time." He nodded slowly, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. For the first time in years, he hugged me, not out of guilt, but out of something real. For a few weeks, things were peaceful. Evan called me every other day, asking about work, the house, old memories of his mother, things he hadn't cared about in years. It felt almost like before. Almost. But peace, I've learned, doesn't last long, when greed has already taken root. And Heather, she was greed wrapped in perfume. It started one Thursday evening. The sky outside my porch glowed amber as the sun sank behind the pines, and the phone rang. Evan's name flashed on the screen, but the voice that answered wasn't his. "William," Heather said coolly, "we need to talk about the inheritance." My stomach sank. I leaned back in my chair. "What inheritance?" "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "Don't play dumb. Evan told me about the bonds, about what his mother left." I stayed quiet. The silence stretched long enough to make her impatient. "I think," she continued, her tone sharp as glass, "it's only fair that we use part of that money to pay off my debts. After all, it affects our future." "Your debts," I said slowly, "are the reason that truck got sold in the first place." "Exactly," she snapped. "So technically, if not for me, he wouldn't have found the money. You should be thanking me." I nearly laughed. "You really believe that, don't you?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow. The kind of breathing that comes from fear disguised as anger. "Look," she said finally, "Evan doesn't understand finances. I do. I can make this money grow. We can invest it. Pay off credit cards, get a new car, move somewhere better." I interrupted. "You mean you can spend it?" Her voice hardened. "You always look down on me, William. You think I'm some kind of gold digger. But Evan and I are a family. That money is ours now." "Funny," I said quietly. "You said the same thing about my truck." The line went dead. The next morning, Evan showed up again, pale, exhausted, wearing the same shirt as the day before. "Dad," he said, rubbing his eyes, "I'm sorry about Heather. She's just stressed." "She's something all right," I muttered. He sighed. "She thinks the money will fix everything." I told her it's Mom's legacy, not a handout. I watched him carefully. "And what do you think, son?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Evan," I said quietly, "your mother left you that money to teach you something, not to fund someone else's spending spree." "I know," he said, looking away. "But it's complicated. She keeps saying I don't trust her, and if I don't give her access, she'll..." He stopped himself. "She'll what?" I pressed. He shook his head. "Forget it. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I'd seen that look before, in my own mirror, decades ago, when Margaret and I were young and struggling. The look of a man trying to keep his marriage from collapsing under the weight of pride. 3 days later, I got another call. This time, it was from the bank manager at Maple Savings. "Mr. Reeves," he said cautiously, "we received a request from your son's wife, Heather Reeves, to transfer funds from box 417 into her name." My heart dropped. And did you? Of course not, he said quickly. We needed both signatures, Evan's and yours. But she was insistent, said her husband was unavailable. Unavailable. That word curdled my blood. Did she say where she was headed next? She mentioned a financial advisor in Dallas. Something about moving the money for better returns. I hung up, the world suddenly sharp and cold around me. That night, I drove to Evan's house. It was dark except for the kitchen light. The blinds were half open, and through them, I could see chaos. Open suitcases, piles of clothes. Heather pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. I told you, he's old. He won't notice until it's done. Just transfer the funds as soon as I send the paperwork. Her voice sliced through the night like a blade. I stepped back into the shadows, fury pulsing through every vein. I could have burst in and confronted her right there, but Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. Let them show who they are, Will. Then they'll have nowhere left to hide. So I didn't knock. I didn't call. I just got back into my truck. Or rather, my new truck. The same model I'd secretly bought back a week after Evan sold the old one. And I drove straight to Maple Savings. Because what Heather didn't know was that Margaret had prepared for this possibility too. The next morning, Heather and Evan walked into the bank, hand in hand, or rather, Heather dragging Evan behind her like a child late for school. I was already there, sitting with the manager. Heather froze when she saw me. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Evan looked from her to me, confused. "Dad, what's going on?" I smiled. "Just tying up some loose ends." The manager cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Reeves, we've already processed. Mr. Reeves' request." "What request?" she snapped. He handed her a copy of the paperwork. Her eyes scanned it, confusion twisting into horror. The signature line read, "Funds from Deposit Box 417 to be permanently donated to the Margaret Reeves Foundation for Single Mothers." Heather's mouth fell open. You can't do this." I stood slowly. "Your mother-in-law could." Evan turned to me, stunned. "Mom set up a foundation?" I nodded. "She wanted the money to go where it would do some good. She left you lessons, not leftovers." Heather slammed her hand on the desk. "That money was ours." "No," I said softly. "It was never yours. It was love money, Heather. The kind that disappears when you try to buy it." Her face twisted, rage and disbelief mixing into something ugly. "You ruined us." "No," I said, walking past her. "You did that all on your own." Outside, Evan followed me into the parking lot, speechless. "Dad," he said finally, voice trembling, "why didn't you tell me?" "Because, son," I said, turning to face him, "you needed to see. What happens when you let greed steer your life? That money was poison the moment she touched it. Now it can do something pure." He looked down, tears glinting in the sun. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Apologies are words, Evan. Forgiveness is work. Start there." That night, back home, I opened the glove box of my new truck. Inside was a photograph. The three of us on Evan's 10th birthday, cake frosting on his chin, Margaret's smile wide and bright. I traced her face with my thumb and whispered, "You were right, Maggie," he finally learned. Morning sunlight crept through the kitchen blinds, tracing golden lines across the table, where I sat sipping coffee from my chipped mug. Margaret's favorite one. The house was quiet again, too quiet. The chaos had passed, but in its wake there was something heavier, reflection. Regret always seems to echo louder when the storm ends. Evan hadn't called for 2 weeks since that day at the bank, and though part of me wanted to believe he was furious, the truth was simpler. He was ashamed. I knew that feeling. I'd worn it myself once. The kind that burns deeper than anger because it forces you to see yourself clearly. I thought I'd seen the last of him for a while. But one Sunday afternoon, I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. I looked up through the window, and there he was, alone this time. No Heather, no excuses. Just my son standing by his car, with a brown envelope clutched in his hands. He stepped onto the porch slowly, like a man approaching a grave. "Dad," he said quietly. "Son." He held up the envelope. "It's everything. The rest of the money Mom left. I didn't touch a cent. I want you to have it back." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Sit." He did. The air between us felt lighter than before, fragile but clean, like something that had just been washed free of dirt. I watched him for a moment, really watched him, the boy who used to sleep on the truck bench during long drives, now sitting there with his shoulders bent under the weight of choices. "Where's Heather?" I asked. He hesitated. "Gone. She said she didn't marry me for morals." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Turns out she was right." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe now you can start rebuilding something worth keeping." He exhaled shakily. "That's why I came. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be the kind of man Mom thought I could be." He slid the envelope across the table. "This belongs with you." I shook my head. "No, son. It belongs where your mother wanted it, in that foundation, in her name. But you can help me run it." He looked up, startled. "You'd trust me with that?" I smiled. "You already learned the hardest lesson. What money can't buy. That's worth more than anything she could have left in a box." For a long time he didn't speak. Then he nodded, eyes glistening. "I'd like that." Over the next few months, the Margaret Reeves Foundation came alive. Evan poured himself into it, helping young mothers find homes, work, education. He fixed things, not just in the community, but inside himself. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see him sitting at the old desk in my study, sorting paperwork with the same focus I once saw when he was a boy learning to carve wood. It was quiet redemption, the kind that doesn't need an audience. One evening, he came into the kitchen holding a worn photograph, the same one from the truck glove box. "She'd be proud, huh?" he said softly. I looked at the picture. Margaret's bright eyes, Evan's childish grin, my arm around both of them. "She already was," I said. "She just wanted you to see it for yourself." Then one day something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in the mail, postmarked 6 months earlier, the ink faint but familiar. The handwriting was Margaret's. My heart stopped. The return address was from her old attorney's office. Inside was a single sheet of stationery and a note addressed to both of us. "To my boys, by the time you read this, my lesson will have found its way to you. I didn't want you to suffer, but I knew the world would test you, Evan, and that your father would have to be the one to remind you who you are. Love is not proven in comfort. It's proven in loss, forgiveness, and what you build from it. I hope when this reaches you, you're sitting together, not in anger, but in peace. With all my love, Mom." I couldn't breathe for a moment. Evan reached out, his hand trembling, resting gently on mine. And in that simple gesture, everything, the fights, the bitterness, the years of distance, just fell away. We sat there in silence, two men who'd finally found their way back to being father and son. A year later, on the anniversary of Margaret's passing, we hosted the first Margaret Reeves Foundation dinner. Dozens of families came, each one touched somehow by the help her legacy had given them. Evan stood at the podium, hands shaking slightly, and said, "My mother believed that love was the only thing worth passing on. She left me money once, but what she really left me was my father." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even mine. That night, after everyone had gone home, Evan and I sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. He turned to me and smiled faintly. "You ever miss her, Dad?" "Every day," I said. "But I don't ache the same way anymore. I feel her everywhere, in the laughter, the good we do, even in the sound of that old truck engine when I started up." He chuckled softly. "That truck still running?" "Oh yeah, still purrs like it always did." We sat there for a while longer, saying nothing, just listening to the night. The crickets, the soft rustle of the wind through the pines, and the faint creak of the porch swing. It all sounded like her voice somehow, whispering that everything was finally right. As Evan got up to leave, he paused beside the truck, his hand resting on the hood. "You know," he said with a wistful smile, "I used to think this thing was just metal and bolts, but now I get it." I looked at him. "What's that?" "It's memory," he said quietly. "It's family." He drove off into the night, the taillights fading, down the long gravel road, the same road we used to take to go fishing when he was little. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace, the kind that doesn't come from winning or teaching lessons, but from knowing that the person you love finally found his way home. Sometimes, the most valuable thing we ever own isn't what's locked in a glove box. It's what's locked in the hearts of the people we love. Because money can vanish, possessions can rust. But love is the only inheritance that never runs out. So if this story touched you, subscribe, share, and leave a comment telling me what lesson you'd leave behind for your family. Because every story, no matter how painful, carries the chance for redemption. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bring a son back home.